Oftentimes, the community members will identify a deaf interpreter as not actually deaf. Suppose that they grew up mainstreamed. A lot of people will question why they were granted a certification in the first place. So you have to take into account the community's view, the profession's view, and the individual interpreter's point of view. And there's a lot of things involved there. I'm going to quickly go over what these terms mean because a lot of people misunderstand what a DI does. They think, oh, a DI just relays information. But that's not always true. They don't always just take one message and turn it into another. There's a lot of actual processing that goes on, figuring out the source message's intended goal and everything, and putting it into the target language and vice versa in order to match both clients' language accurately. It's not just simply, sometimes it is simply relaying information, but it should not always be. The interpreter should be looking for meaning. A shadowing interpreter just copies what's going on for visual access. A lot of times you'll find this in theater, where the interpreter will be side by side with whoever's performing and copy what they're signing. This last one, mirror interpreting, will again copy what someone's saying and make it visually accessible for everyone in an audience. The goal here should be the source language into the target language. That's it. A deaf-blind interpreter or a deaf-blind intervener or SSP are very different. They are not one and the same. Deaf interpreter does not insinuate that the interpreter will be guiding any deaf-blind client around. That would be a different role. Sometimes these roles get muddied, but they should have clear definitions. International Sign Language interpreters is something that, it doesn't mean that, oh, I'm a good interpreter. It means I can go ahead and do international sign interpreting isn't enough. If you're well-traveled, have been to various countries, have experience with all these different types of sign language, and have been well-versed in their various cultures, and are able to adapt to those cultures, then you may be qualified to interpret internationally. But only being proficient in ASL doesn't necessarily mean that you are proficient in International Sign. International Sign is its own language. It's very gesticular, very clear, very visual. There's not always message equivalency between the HVO is pretty much just gesturing. When I say interpreter, a lot of you have a visual. Either they're going into spoken English or spoken language to a sign language, or vice versa. The same goes for here. ASL-English interpreters. They take in the ASL and they interpret it into English. They hear spoken English and they interpret into ASL. Go back and forth. That is the point here. But if you take a look at a deaf interpreter, sometimes that can get confusing. They also have an advocacy component. Whereas you can't be both roles simultaneously. That's conflicting. If you're there to help and support, that may impede the interpreting process. Whether or not that's appropriate is a controversial topic, Because they might think, oh, you're an interpreter, you're a deaf interpreter, but it seems like you're taking on the advocacy point of view, or excuse me, advocacy role. So that can be a point of contention.